everyone, thanks for clicking our video. Taylor, what's wrong? You look terrible.
I just took the metro during rush hour.
Oh, the metro is the worst.
So complicated.
Complicated or complex. Complexity in the Shanghai metro, yay!
Alright, so let's get started with a few fun metro facts. Every decade, about 25 new systems are built in the world. And in Shanghai alone, 2.3 billion people take the metro every year. So obviously we know the metro is a great thing. It helps with accessibility, helps with the 23 million people that live in the city, but as we've seen, it causes anxiety.
So here's our research question. We wanted to find out if the train schedules of lines 4, 6, and 9 are synchronized to most efficiently facilitate the flow of people transferring at the Century Avenue metro station during the weekday rush hour from 6 p.m. to 7:45 p.m. So here's how we set up our project. We decided to focus on a specific interchange in the Century Avenue subway station. This is where 3 lines intersect, lines 4, line 6, and line 9. Passengers come down from line 6 and down from line 9, up from line 4. They meet in the middle. Complexity happens. So let's go over some terminology that we use in our paper to start. We define something as passenger flow. For us, passenger flow is the collective movement of passenger traffic that results from train arrivals. So if you want to visualize what passenger flow is, it's when the doors of a subway open and this wave of people comes out. It's not the 1 or 2 stragglers wasting time in the metro. Rush hours from 6 o'clock p.m. to 7:45 p.m. Monday to Friday. And point of origin, when you hear us use that, we mean the starting point of the people who are entering the intersection. So either from a subway line or from an entrance to the subway.
Alright, so we looked into some past work before we got started. This paper is super cool. Basically, these men looked at all the different metro systems in the world, figured out which are most complex based on their length, the number of stops, transfer times, things like that. Based on this work, Shanghai's number 9, however, it was done in 2014, and with the new lines, I believe it would be higher. We also found this awesome paper, which looks at complex networks, complex systems as many layers. So the Shanghai Metro has 3 layers. First, the physical layer, such as the stairs. Second, the traffic layer, all the people. And third is a layer that combines the two and sees how they affect one another.
Alright, so here's what we did. We decided to do our project in 2 stages. The first measured the emergence of crowding at this intersection from 6 o'clock to 6:45, and the second time was from 7 to 7:45. So here's what we would do. Taylor and I stood here, and whenever a passenger traffic began, we would time how long it would take for the traffic to totally clear out. So if line 6 arrived, how long does it take the line 6 passenger flow to get through the intersection? We did this for all the lines during these 2 times during the rush hour.
If you ever want to get funny looks, stand in the metro with a notebook.
Yes, this is true. So here's the data that we collected. As you can see, we have our lines here and for when they started, when they ended, and the length of time that it took. You guys can look at this more closely, but we're going to keep moving for the sake of time. So what this showed was sensitive dependence on initial conditions. Oh, terminology, what do we mean? Okay, don't worry. Let's take the example of line 9 on day 2. The first time that line 9 flowed, it flowed totally interrupted, meaning that when line 9 passengers were trying to come through, line 6 and line 4 were intersecting with them. This took line 9 passengers 53.48 seconds to pass through. Another important thing to note is that the number of passengers wasn't actually changing. The cars were filled to capacity during the rush hour. When line 9 was partially interrupted, that means that for more than half of its time, it was being interrupted still by line 6 or line 4. It only took 22 seconds for the passengers from line 9 to flow through. What does this mean? This means that even though for most of its second time it was still being interrupted, the very few seconds that it was allowed to flow freely greatly reduced the emergence of crowding for line 9 passengers. This is sensitive dependence on initial conditions.
Mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing, people. So if you want to visualize this in a more visual way, you can look at it here. This is the amount of time that it takes each line to flow. Here's line 9 when it was partially interrupted. You can see here, for less than half its time, it was actually allowed to flow freely. But the amount of time that it took the passengers to flow was significantly reduced than when it was completely interrupted, even though the same amount of people were trying to cross through.
Crazy. So obviously, as she mentioned, here's line day 1 and day 2. Ultimately, this made us come to the conclusion that scheduling is efficient. I know. Because as you can see, there's very few gaps where no people are coming. There's always people. But
But what's important to know is that even though it is scheduled efficiency, you do still see the emergence of sensitive dependence on initial conditions. We'll get with ways that we can try to work around it afterward, but it seems like the scheduling is actually done to the best it can be. Crowding just happens. If you want to visualize our data collected in a different way, you can look at these two networks. This is the data that was collected during the second half of rush hour, where less people were passing through because everyone was already home and enjoying their dinner. This is during the first part of rush hour when it was much more crowded. For every line drawn, it represents 10 seconds of uninterrupted traffic flow. So as you can see, line 6 is where things get kind of crazy. This is where most people are passing through. Line 4 also has a lot of crowding. Line 9, especially towards the end of rush hour, is actually not doing too terribly. So if you ever want to not be crowded, you should live far on the other end of Kuxi, and you should go home late on line 9 because you'll be fine that way. Yes.
A bonus to our project is take the metro after 7 p.m.
Yes.
So we suggest an actual change to the physical layout, one of our layers of the complex network. So as we mentioned, the stairs come down from here, and if people want to go from 6 to 4, they have to cross over this escalator, which is coming up. If this escalator was moved and the stairs were put here, the people could immediately transfer to line 4. Line 4 could continue to 9 or 6 much easier, and line 9 would continue on their way without any change. Ultimately, we think that based on sensitive dependence of initial conditions, this would also reduce the emergence of crowding exponentially.
So what we've noticed is that there are complicated features of the metro, such as the physical layout or the schedule of the metro train arrivals, that actually creates complexity within the intersection. We can't change the schedule, it looks like, but we could change the physical layout.
So the reason this is different than other projects that have been done is because of its specificity.
Specificity.
Thank you. We focused on one specific intersection, as we've mentioned, which is much easier to see the day-to-day operations of the metro versus the other projects which focus on large scale and look at many different systems. That said, it can't necessarily be extrapolated to larger systems because it's so specific.
So let's get into the limitations of our work. There are many. As Taylor said, it cannot be extrapolated. We focus only on this one intersection. If we change the metro based on this one intersection, the entire Century Avenue subway system could experience crazy emergence of more complexity.
Or it could be awesome.
Or it could be chaotic. Probably not. We don't know. There's so many limits. Okay. We also can't say with utmost confidence where the passengers originated from. It looked like they were coming down from 6, 4, or 9, but they really could be wandering the subway in circles just to mess with our project. Maybe we have enemies in Shanghai. We don't know. We also had a hard time defining things like passenger flow. Just for the simplicity of our project and to make our network, we had to assume that passenger flow meant the wave of people that come when a subway door is open, but we couldn't account for the people who are just wandering around the subway. So here is our lovely friend, Michael Scott, looking so proudly and yet disappointed in our efforts. Thanks, Michael.
So looking forward, obviously this project is cool because it can branch out into so many future projects. You could look at other interchanges at Century Avenue, you could look at other metro hubs in Shanghai, you could look at the whole system, you could look at other metros. There is so much possibility, but once again, when you are specific, it's hard to know whether or not it's going to be effective at other locations.
So what we've learned is that you can always do more. Oh no! You can always do more than you think you can when studying complex systems. A quote created by John Wooden and Lizzy LeClaire.
Perfect.
Genius. Okay, so layouts and schedules affect the metro. They make things complex, but they're hard to solve. Questions? Comments? No, oh my gosh, you loved it? We did too!
Thank you!
Thanks!
Give us a like!
We're out of time.
Bye!
Okay.